improve. I want to start with the first lesson in IGCSE Biology. In the first class, we just want to tell you what are the differences between living and non-living things. So there are 7 characteristics that show you the differences between living things like animals or plants or even humans and non-living things like rocks or chairs or whatever. So one way to remember all of these 7 characteristics is by the mnemonic Mrs. Gren. So every letter here represents one of those characteristics. So I want to start with letter M for movement. Movement is the change of position. Now, in case of animals, animals move about because they want to get their energy requirements. So for instance, here the cheetah is hunting, so it really has to move. In plants, the movement is less clear because plants don't change their entire position. Plants rather change directions, but nonetheless, movement is universal. Movement is found in all living organisms. So once again, the definition is change of position of the entire organism, like an animal, or part of the organism, like plants. Respiration is the release of energy, so it provides energy for metabolism. Now the word metabolism is like fancy word for reactions that take place in the body. So whenever you eat, the food that you eat, you break it down and you provide energy for the chemical reactions that happen inside your body. So the chemical reactions of metabolism could be building up or breaking down. But nonetheless, all of the energy that you need comes from this process, respiration. Usually the essential ingredient for respiration to occur is glucose. So glucose is really needed for us to provide energy. Glucose is a sugar. However, we could still respire other things like proteins, but nonetheless, glucose is the essential carbohydrate that is needed for respiration. Now, we're done with M for movement, R for respiration. We're moving now to S for sensitivity. Now, sensitivity is that ability to detect changes in the surroundings. So you could see here the plant is sensing its surrounding. It's actually sensing touch here. So this ability really important for all organisms, not only plants. So we really have to be able to detect what is happening around us, and we must be also able to respond. So the key words to remember in sensitivity is the ability to detect the changes that's happening around us. This could be sound or touch or heat, but we also have to respond appropriately. We're moving now to the letter G in Mrs. Gren. G is for growth. Now, there are 3 ways you could measure growth. Growth could be by size. Growth could be by mass. Growth could also be by the number of cells. So you could see here the girl is actually growing. Her mass is increasing, her size is increasing, but there's also an increase in the number of cells. Cells in biology are the building blocks of all organisms. So for us to grow, we must get more and more cells. Reproduction is the ability to get more organisms. So in this picture we see bacteria. Bacteria are reproducing. Now, to produce more of the same kind is reproduction. So here I'm starting with bacteria. So obviously when bacteria reproduce, we're also going to get bacteria. So the definition here is simple. Producing more of the same kind. And what I mean here by the same kind means it has to be the same type of living thing. So for instance, if cats reproduce, then obviously they're going to give rise to kittens. Excretion is to remove wastes and also to remove anything in excess of our requirements. So this gentleman here is doing excretion by just breathing out. While we're breathing out, we get rid of toxic substances like carbon dioxide. We also get rid of excess water inside our body. So excretion is removal of wastes, anything that is toxic, and excess. So 3 words: excess, toxic, and waste materials. Nutrition is the last letter here in Mrs. Gren. Nutrition is the ability to get nutrients. Now, nutrition in plants is done by a process called photosynthesis. So plants don't need to hunt or something. They just need light energy and carbon dioxide to make their own food. This is not the case for animals, where animals have basically to eat. So nutrition is another simple definition, just to get nutrients. Photosynthesis is exclusive for plants. However, animals have to hunt to get their nutrients. So we're going to do a quick revision of the Mrs. Gren 7 characteristics. M is change of position. R is release of energy. S is to detect and respond. G for growth. R for reproduction. E is excretion, to get rid of wastes. And N is for nutrition. Now this is taken from my textbook. This is actually the very first page of the textbook. You could see here that we got all of the 7 characteristics, and I've also added some extra notes here on the right hand side. So you could see that for movement in plants is directional growth. What does directional growth? This means that plants actually grow in the direction of light. This is called also movement. You have also the definition of respiration, which is to release energy, and you also have the definition of metabolism. Metabolism is one also important definition. So in the textbook, wherever you see this sign of the head and the brain, this means it's one essential definition you have to really memorize. One really important line here is the dry mass. Growth is increase in size, dry mass, and number of cells. So what does dry mass mean? Dry mass means the mass of organism minus its water content. It's really important in biology to measure mass without water, because we continuously drink water, increase our entire mass, but drinking water does not mean that we have actually grown. You don't grow if you drink a cup of water. So to measure the real growth, you really have to measure mass minus the water content, and that's called dry mass. Reproduction is just to make more of the same type, but in viruses, which we're going to talk about in the second class, viruses don't have any one of those 7 characteristics. So the only characteristic that viruses have is reproduction. So viruses don't move, don't respire. Viruses only have reproduction. So this is why reproduction is like the most universal characteristic of all organisms.